XRP was able to achieve something where most other altcoins failed. XRP has been around for a long time and it stayed relevant. Now what's interesting is that when we look at the very long-term price chart of XRP and when we compare this to Bitcoin, we can see pretty consistent trading ranges that help us time the market quite reliably. Now have a look at this. What we see over here is the historical snapshot of coin market cap. So this is from the 25th of August 2013. So that's more than 10 years ago. And XRP at the time was at number 3. Bitcoin was at number 1, XRP at number 3. And then have a look at all of those other tokens. You've probably forgotten about most of them, right? What is Feathercoin? What is Primecoin? What is Devcoin? Nobody talks about them anymore. Now here's coin market cap today. XRP fell from number 3 to number 4, but that's just because of the introduction of Tether. So XRP had been around longer than Tether. And of course, the top tokens look very different to 10 years ago. Now, the price growth of the XRP token tends to come in steps, as in we tend to go sideways for a long time, then we suddenly pump up to then go sideways for a while again. And those increases in price are always explained with news, but I don't think that's the entire story. And so here's the XRP long-term price chart. And those vertical lines, they mark local bottoms, as in it was a great time to buy during those bottoms. Subsequently, XRP went up here by 800% or here by 6,000%, over here again by 800% or just recently by 500%. Now what happened during those points in time? How would one be able to buy at those particular points? What was different in July of 2014 or March of 2017, December of 2019 or November of 2024? Here is what is different. XRP relative to Bitcoin hit a low during that time. Isn't that fascinating? Those vertical lines over here, they correspond to the vertical lines over here. And this is the XRP price relative to Bitcoin. And it looks like when XRP bottoms out at a very similar price level, that's the best time to buy. It's pretty much impossible to say that XRP is cheap just looking at the US dollar price. But looking at the relative valuation to Bitcoin, we do see some consistency. Now, this kind of approach works for many altcoins. It doesn't just work for XRP. A lot of altcoins have a somewhat constant trading range with Bitcoin and with Ethereum. And why does it work? It's because the altcoins are in competition to one another. There is a set amount of capital, the set amount of traders, and that moves capital from one altcoin to the next based on where currently the attention is, based on where currently the news is. If attention is currently extremely low on an altcoin, there is an above average chance that it can outperform once attention shifts again to that alt. And that is, I believe, what we are seeing here with XRP. This was a very nice bottom indicator. Now, I also believe that this is a good top indicator, because let's take the same chart and just look at potential short-term resistances and supports. Yes, we could put the resistance over here, but how often have we seen prices that high relative to Bitcoin? The last time was more than 7 years ago. So in the last 5 years, we've been in a somewhat constant trading range. And just based on that range, the current risk is much higher than the current potential upside. The upside versus Bitcoin is maybe 13%. The downside is potentially 76%. Now, of course, all of those lines are completely imaginary. We don't know if the lines will hold in the future, but we can say that just from the bottoms in the past over all of those years, it was a pretty good indicator to buy at least low. Potentially, it's also a good indicator to sell high. Because fundamentally, why are we buying an altcoin over just buying Bitcoin? The reason is we want to get more performance than buying Bitcoin, right? Bitcoin is already very large in its market cap, and so it cannot just 10 or 100x anytime soon. Now, the idea is that when we buy an altcoin, the market cap is smaller and thus potentially the upside is larger as well. So we are taking on more risk by buying XRP, thus we should also expect more performance. The risk to reward needs to make sense. And yeah, there's a big question if the risk to reward currently for XRP makes that much sense. Yes, we have seen higher prices relative to Bitcoin in the past, but it has been quite a long time ago. Here's another alternative way to look at something very similar. So this is XRP dominance. How much of all of crypto percentage-wise is currently in XRP. And again, we see the bottoms align very nicely, and again, we see very similar tops. And currently, we tend to be rather on the higher end. Now, why do I think that this trading range here prevails more than this larger trading range? Why don't I simply say the risk is over here and the potential reward is over here? The reason is token inflation. It's an expanding supply of XRP tokens. So Ripple continues to sell XRP to the users, and that selling, of course, is some pressure on the price. This is the XRP supply over time. And let's just look at it starting in 2018. So since the beginning of 2018, the XRP supply grew by 50%. For comparison, the supply of Bitcoin during the same time grew by 17%. So it's no real surprise that XRP has a harder time climbing back to its higher levels, because now it takes way more capital to reach those older heights. Again, because now we've got way more XRP tokens floating. So this delta of more than 30 percentage points in growth in the supply has to be made up with an adequate amount of demand as well. If XRP doesn't outgrow the demand compared to Bitcoin, it cannot outperform in price. So we've got more risk with XRP, it's more volatile, it's smaller in market cap, and at the same time we've got more token inflation. We've got the supply growing quite a bit. Now, if you want to learn more about this topic, there's actually a quite interesting, somewhat older Reddit post. So feel free to search for this. People often claim that XRP is deflationary, but it is not. Every year the circulating supply increases, so XRP supply is inflationary. So just search for this in cryptocurrency by Beyonder on Reddit. It's a very interesting, not so well-known summary of what's actually going on with the XRP supply. Clearly, the overall situation in crypto has changed recently, and there seems to be one event that started it all off. What we've got over here is the Bitcoin price, and this red circle marks when Donald Trump launched his Memecoin. So that's this over here. Most people got burnt with that Memecoin. If you bought this in the first few hours after launch, you made money. If you didn't, you lost money. Since the launch, Bitcoin lost 21% of its value. Of course, the Trump token lost much more. A lot of other altcoins also lost more. And so the majority of people lose, of course, when the market looks like this. There's pretty much nobody that has their entire crypto portfolio in Maker or in Bearer or in Bitcoin Cash. Even if you hold those tokens, you probably have a diversified portfolio and you're down with all of those other tokens. Now, here's something that's not so obvious. We see Bitcoin over here. Bitcoin went up by 14% in the last year. And this is now the top 100 ordered by their performance in the last year. And there are a few altcoins that did better than Bitcoin. Two of them being gold derivatives, so PaxG and Tether Gold. But there's also others that performed slightly better. But the vast majority of altcoins actually performed much, much worse. If you picked a random altcoin in the top 100 1 year ago, you've got roughly an 80% chance that you underperformed simply Bitcoin. And that's of course a problem, right? Because altcoins have more risk, and so in theory, they should also perform better, especially during times when Bitcoin tends to go up. And so I don't try to find the needle in the haystack. I don't try to pick the bearer coin in order to then make money. I do the exact opposite. I bet on the vast majority of altcoins doing worse than Bitcoin. And most of the time, that strategy makes money. Have a look at this, for example. This is Matic relative to Bitcoin, a very constant underperformance. Or this is Balancer relative to Bitcoin. Again, a very constant underperformance. And we can make money from that relative valuation. We don't have to bet on Balancer or on Matic going down versus the US dollar. We can bet on it doing worse than Bitcoin and make money when this thing continues to go down. Or we can also mirror that chart, right? We can just bet on this continue to go up. This is now Bitcoin relative to Matic. That's the logarithmic chart. This is the linear chart. So why does this happen? The reason is tokenomics, right? It's the altcoins that print more and more tokens, and that token allocation goes to the insiders, it goes to the developers. And for meme coins, we don't necessarily have an expanding supply, but for meme coins, we tend to have a lot of ownership by the insiders as well that simply sell off over time. And that's why Bitcoin performs so well versus all of those altcoins. And that's why I believe those are the kinds of charts we want to bet on. Yes, we can of course try to time Bitcoin itself, and we can try to buy this at 16K and then sell it at 100K. And this is a possible way to make money. I'm also trying to time Bitcoin. But why would we try to pick the few altcoins that perform still okay? Why not just flip this thing around and make money when those bubbles are red? So for example, over here on the 6th of December, I have made a premium update video how I have sold some of my Bitcoin because a liquidity crunch was incoming. So that was over here. I've made another announcement on the 25th of February how I've sold all of my speculative Bitcoin and how I'm selling all of my altcoin positions. And that was over here. I opened a position betting on falling prices of Chainlink on the 23rd of January. I opened a short position on Dogecoin and on PancakeSwap on the 14th of February. And the reason why I'm sharing this is because I've now closed the Chainlink position, so it lost 42% in the span of a few weeks. I've also closed the Cake short, which went down versus BNB by 27%. And I've also closed the Dogecoin short, also in profit. So really, when you know what you're doing, if you know how to do the proper risk management, that you don't get liquidated, and when you have the odds in your favor during times like this, when most altcoins underperform Bitcoin, then it is rather straightforward to make money like this. We don't have to find the needle in the haystack. We don't have to make 100x returns with a random meme coin. We can simply just let our capital compound by making 20% here and 40% over here. Most people are scared of betting on falling prices. But that's why I've made dedicated tutorial videos on the topic, how to do the proper risk management, how to set up those positions also in DeFi and Web3, not just with centralized exchanges, how to do this cost efficiently, and also how to select the right assets to short. There's more than 100 tutorial videos in total in premium. The link is down below. It's thebitcoinstrategy.com. Of course, I'm also sharing in detail how I currently see the market. There's a premium update video every 3 to 4 days. And I challenge you to look at other influencers, what they said during those times, right? Have a look at the date, have a look at the title of those different premium update videos, and let me know who said already on February 18th that it might make sense to bet on falling prices, or that crypto stopped expanding in the last 2 to 3 weeks, or how your influencer is selling aggressively. I don't really see many other influencers saying it like it is. Most YouTube channels just sell hopium. Most YouTube channels just want to push up their own bags, but they're not really looking realistically at the prices. They're not really looking at how much are people actually already in profit and when will that profit be taken. So if you appreciate during times like this that I keep it real, then of course feel free to give this video a like. Feel free to also subscribe. I publish videos regularly. And of course, feel free to also check out premium. The link is down below. Looking very much forward to seeing you there as well. Cheers.